All right, in this lesson, we're going to talk about box dimensions. Okay, so we've been playing a lot in the CSS. We've looked at fonts and colors, look at text, how we can manipulate our text and decorate it and do all these other cool things. And then in the last lesson, we talked about borders, creating borders around our elements. Something I want to look at real quick. I want to try to put a border around, say, these anchor tags. And let's see what happens. Here we are, nav link. I'm going to put a border around it. I'm just going to make it orange. Ooh, if I can spell correctly. There we go. Okay, so notice that when we put a border around our links, it didn't do like the other borders did. The borders around our sections covered the entire row, okay? Whereas when it came to the links, that border just went around the text. That would be different if I went to the LI and let's say put a border around it. Border 1 pix solid, and let's make this blue. Notice the border around the LI goes all the entire row. And that is again because the anchor tag is an inline element, whereas the LI is a block level element. So this is just a visual representation of what we've talked about when we say block level versus inline. An inline element, the border or whatever, or that element only contains the space so much as the content that is within it. Whereas the block level element, it is the entire row. So it contains the information, the content, but it's going to take up the entire row. I just wanted to show that to you before we go into box dimensions. Okay, so when I'm talking about box dimension, I'm particularly talking about in CSS the width property and the height property. So we're talking about width and height, okay? And they pretty much take the same units of measurement, however, they work a little bit differently, okay? So when it comes to width and height, we can use, let's see, we can use pixels, so we can measure a box by pixels. Um, we can use a ratio. What I mean is by percentage. That one is very useful. Another one that we can use is what is called viewport width and viewport height. So viewport width is a VW and viewport height is a VH. Okay, and essentially what that means is we can provide a value that is a percentage, if you will, of the viewport width or the viewport height. And the viewport width is basically the browser window. Okay, so however wide the browser window is, or however tall the browser window is, that's how much, or that's how we can size our containers. Okay, so let's apply that somewhere. I'm going to go to section. I already have a box, a border around it. I'm going to change this pixelation, the border from 4 pixels to 2 pixels. I just want it to be a little bit thinner. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the width of the section. Okay, so we can see what happens. I'm going to first, I'm going to say a width of, let's say, 500 pixels. So when I give it a width of 500 pixels, you see that we have shortened this this section container. We've actually compressed it and made it a static width of 500 pixels. And that means that no matter what size our browser window is, that section is going to be 500 pixels in width. So that is one way that we can provide width to a container, okay? And as I stated, another way we can do it is using a percentage or a ratio. So I could say, let's make it 80%. I changed to 80%, and now you see that the width, the section's width is now 80% of the viewport. So in other words, if I stretch this out, excuse me, wrong window. Okay, now if I stretch it out, now I see that the width of section is always going to be 80% of whatever my window is. So that's another way. Another way of writing that is I can say 80 VW or viewport width, and you see that really doesn't change anything. It is 80%. Keep grabbing the wrong window. 80% of the viewport width. So that is one. That is how we can apply width to a container, and that can apply to anything. That could be for text, that could be for a section, for any block level element. We can give it width if we want to. Another thing we can do again is we can do height. So I'm going to give it height, and let's say height. I'm going to say 600 pixels. And now you see that each section has a static height of 600 pixels. Okay. Again, let's see what happens if we try to do percentage. Let's see what happens if I say 80%. Does it do anything? Not really. You see, it doesn't work because the section, when we're referring to height, is saying 80% of what in particular. It's looking for something to base itself on. Okay, now there's a way we can fix that. What I could do is for my main, I'm going to make this look really bad. But I'm going to take my main and I'm going to say give it a height of 1200 pixels. So I give main a height of 1200 pixels. And so now what happens is each section is now 80% of height. Okay. I'm sorry, 80% of its height is 80% of main rather. So you see that's what, now that section, if we go look at our HTML, section is nested inside of main. Okay. So since it's inside of main and we've given main a static height at 1200 pixels, well then what section says, okay, so my height is going to be 80% of main. So then each one would be, you do the math, at 960 pixels in height, which will throw it off because 960 pixels, 960 pixels, 960 pixels is greater than 1200. So we have an issue there. I'm going to make this, let's say 30% of main. That'd be a little bit more appropriate. But that's how percentages can work with height. So it's a little bit tricky. But if I wanted to do based on a size of something else, a better method to use would be to say viewport height. Like I say, now section is 30 viewport height, so it's 30% of viewport height. So what that means is, and you'll see this a lot, one thing you could do is make it 100 VH, and so now each section is the height of my window, okay, or my viewport. So that's the cool thing that you could do with height. And that's pretty much it. So there can be some tricks with it. I could say something like, say for instance, I don't know if this is going to do anything. It may not do anything at all. Let's give this, I'm going to make that 100% with 100%, and my height, I'm going to set my height to auto, which is another value. And you see it really didn't do anything, or it looks like it didn't do anything. Essentially, what it means is it is going to automatically scale itself based on the content that's inside. And that is the default for when it comes to height for containers. The height is going to fit all of the content on the inside, um, and by default, and we can adjust the height if we need to. So if I want to make a box, uh, then I can do that simply by using width and height. And let's do that real quick. I'm going to, inside of main, underneath that last section, I'm just going to create a div I'm going to call box. Okay, just because, let's make a box. So I gave it a class box. You can go back here and see just a div for the class box. And what I'm going to do here in my CSS is I'm just going to say box, and I'm going to give it a width. Let's say 300 pixels. Give it a height of 300 pixels, so this is more like a square actually. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to give it a background color. Let's just take that blue, it's right there. So there's our box. Now, we talked about border radius in the last lesson and how we can make a perfect circle. Okay, so in order for us to make a perfect circle, we're halfway there. We have the width, we have the height. They're the same. Okay, width and height are the same. And what we're going to do is we're going to say border radius. And now if we get that 50%, to show I wasn't lying to you the last lesson, now we have a perfect circle. And that's how you make a perfect circle in CSS. We give take a container, give it width and height of the same amount, and then we give it a border radius of 50%. And that's how you make a circle. So you got the little extra tidbit right there. We were just going to talk about width and height, but I add a little something extra in there for you to make you feel good about yourself. Yay! Don't we feel great? Okay, so that is it for this lesson. Again, width and height, you can use pixels, you can use a ratio, or you can use viewport height, viewport width to size your containers. So practice with that. You can apply it to pretty much anything. Now you may notice how stuff may get thrown off a little bit. That's okay. I don't mind that. As much as I mind you, not practicing or just doing what I'm providing you. This is not going to be enough. You have to practice stuff on your own. Try some things, work some things out and discover what you can do with CSS. Okay. The next lesson we're going to do is going to be on margin and padding, which we'll enjoy that one. If I say we'll enjoy, that means you're probably going to hate it. But anyways, we're going to do margin and padding on the next lesson, so I'll see you on the other side. Peace, power, blessings.